chaos is synonymous with the power of warp space, which is also known as the Sea of Souls or magic. The very energies and worship of chaos can be summed up with but a single word: corruption. Typically, when one turns to the worship of chaos and the ruinous powers that exist within the warp, it will usually result in corruption, a poisoning and degradation of both body and soul, which some might even be generous to describe as evolution or ascension. The power of chaos itself will eventually embed itself at a genetic level, which in turn will lead to various mutations manifesting within the most devout and fanatical worshippers of the Chaos Gods. Such mutations include, but are not limited to, horns, tentacles, elongated fangs, wings, and so on. During the events of the Horus Heresy, the chief apothecary of the Emperor's Children's Space Marine Legion, Fabius Bile, discusses in detail the genetic alteration caused by demonic entities when he studied blood samples of the Primarch Fulgrim, who himself had become victim to demonic possession thanks in part to his exposure to the demon bound within the Silver Blade of Lair.
A change in the composition of his blood and flesh. It is as though his molecular structure has begun to dissolve the bonds linking its constituent parts into a cohesive whole. It's quite fascinating, you understand. It is as though his form is preparing for some great ascension, a wondrous shedding of a redundant form, as his flesh is remade into something extraordinary.
For the most part, individuals will turn to the worship of the ruinous powers in order to obtain power, glory, material wealth, or simply out of spite, revenge, or the need to have their prayers answered, believing that the God Emperor of mankind has turned his back upon them. Now, while falling to chaotic corruption may appear at first glance to be a direct result of one's choices being taken, is the taint of chaos solely a result of nurture over nature? Or could the taint of chaos, and therefore eventually falling to its temptations and corruption, actually be passed down genetically from parent to child? Now usually, when individuals are discovered to have fallen under the sway of the ruinous powers, organisations such as the Inquisition and the Ecclesiarchy will seemingly stop at nothing until such heretics are purged. But the galaxy is a large place, and as such, certain individuals tend to slip through the cracks in the net cast by these organisations. These individuals could even go forth and start families of their own after being corrupted by the powers of the warp at a genetic level, and therefore, in theory, have the possibility to pass their taint on to their offspring. In fact, this possibility is shown to have explicitly happened on at least one occasion. During the events of the story Inquisitor Ascendant, Lord Inquisitor Defay and his acolyte Garvier travel to the world of Nicodemus, which had recently been assaulted by the forces of chaos, before the demonic legions were driven back by Imperial forces. Lord Inquisitor Defay and Garvier encountered demonic entities as they made their way to the Hall of Records in their quest to understand as to how the forces of chaos managed to gain a foothold upon the planet. To this end, the duo would begin an investigation of the surviving nobles of the Metheldus dynasty, after discovering that Hugo Metheldus, the sole survivor at the centre of the outbreak, was in fact a latent psyker, and this fact had provided the forces of chaos an entry point onto the world. Defay and Garvier would then travel to the Duchy of Lorth, the territory of the Metheldus dynasty, and discover within the fortress of Schloss Lorth that Lady Cora Metheldus had been sheltering the members of her bloodline who showed gross physical signs of chaotic corruption, such as crab-like claws and long goat-like horns. After slaying all of these tainted souls, Defay and Garvier along with the ecclesiarchal cardinal Sarthos, travelled to the manse of Gustov Strome, who was a distant blood relative of the Metheldus dynasty. What's interesting is that Strome seemed ignorant of the chaotic taint that dwelled within his bloodline, and after 6 hours of interrogation, the chaotic taint began to bubble to the surface, and would then eventually take hold of Strome's body and mind.
What have you done to me? What have you found in me? What have you done to me?
Gustov Strome would then grow larger and bulkier, sprouting large horns and long razor-sharp claws, before going on a rage-induced rampage. Acolyte Garvier would then begin to ponder if Strome would have been able to remain a loyal servant of the Emperor if it wasn't for Inquisitor DeFay's interrogation agitating the concealed taint of chaos within him.
Unerringly, my master has cut his way to the truth. It seems to me that Strome didn't even realize he carried the chaos taint in his heart. Did it only awaken because of my master's questions? Have we destroyed a man who otherwise would have led an incorrupt life, denying the darkness that lurked deep inside him?
This not only indicates that the taint of chaotic corruption can indeed be passed down generation to generation, but those who do carry the taint of chaos within them are seemingly able to lead normal and incorrupt lives, until moments of extreme stress awakens the taint within them, which in turn corrupts their body and soul. But not only that, the taint of chaos can also be viewed as not only an inherited affliction, but seemingly it can also be passed on in the form of a sexually transmitted infection. Several months into their investigation, Inquisitor DeFay and Garvier meet with Lord Panos, whose wife was part of the Metheldus bloodline. Lord Panos, his wife, and many other relatives of the Metheldus bloodline would then attempt to murder DeFay, Garvier, and Cardinal Sarthos, physically shifting their bodies at will to transform themselves into monstrous forms comprised of massive teeth, horns, and talons before attacking Inquisitor DeFay and his retinue. This would suggest that Lord Panos was either turned to the worship of the ruinous powers by his wife, or instead had simply contracted the taint after consummating their marriage, which would lead to the birth of their somehow uncorrupted, yet clinically insane son, Jasper. If the taint of chaos can indeed be passed down as an inherited trait to the offspring of the corrupted, or even through the simple act of sexual contact, then this would make the threat of chaotic corruption extremely subtle, and therefore even more dangerous than anyone could have ever believed. What do you think about the taint of chaos? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.